Hi, this is Bob from Hobby Concepts, and today I'm going to start building the new 770S 8x4/4 from Tamiya. I did an unboxing of this a couple of weeks ago, which hopefully you saw. Today we'll actually get the chassis up to this point. But before I get started, I just want to say I got an email from YouTube this week that my channel has surpassed 5 million views. 5 million views. I mean, when I started doing this, I had no idea this was going to happen. I just wanted to build models and film them, and it's turned into something truly amazing. I really appreciate all you guys who watch my channel and give me comments and write me emails and buy things from me. It's just been a spectacular ride. So anyway, today I'm going to get this 770S built up through this chassis stage. One of the things I mentioned in the unboxing was I really wanted to try to figure out how to servo operate the lift axle. I'm happy to report I did it. It works great. I'm going to show you how to do it. Let's get started. Okay, so we're going to build this Scania 770S 8x4/4. I just wanted to do a quick picture of the box. I'm not going to unbox it. You can look at my unboxing video if you want to see that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build this truck. I'm not going to go through it step by step because I have a ton of videos already on the 770, but not the 8x4 version. So what I'm going to concentrate on this version is the lift axle, the steering, because both of these axles steer, and all the things that are different than the standard 770, which mainly would be the equipment rack and some of the other details. And then of course I am going to light this up and put sound in it and everything. So this video, the first part, will really concentrate on the chassis, and I hope to be able to operate the lift axle from a servo. So I'm going to open this up, spread it out on my bench, and start building. As I get started on this kit, it's got an immense amount of parts. So one of the things I normally do when I'm building a kit, not on camera, is I just build all the sub-assemblies first. So I built the transmission, I put the tires and wheels together, which gets rid of a lot of parts, and built the rear ends. One thing I want to point out, this kit comes with a lot of ball bearings, and it really comes with enough ball bearings to do the whole truck. You notice I haven't opened this yet. But the ball bearings are not sealed. Now, you can see this ball bearing right here has a blue seal. And that's like the aftermarket bearings that I sell. And then this bearing here is the Tamiya bearing that comes in the kit that's not sealed. So what I do is I always have a sealed bearing where it's facing the outside world. So for example, the ends of the axle here, sealed bearing, down inside here, non-sealed bearing. Transmission, sealed bearings here, non-sealed bearings inside. When I do the front wheels, I will use sealed bearings, both inside and out. Any place that dirt, mud, dust, anything like that could get in. So right here, sealed bearing on the outside, non-sealed bearing on the inside. So this axle here is ready to go on. But I just don't like using non-sealed bearings on the outside. So anyway, it's just one of my little fluky tendencies. I have a lot of them, but I'm very picky about my builds. So if you use this kit, it's certainly better than the bronze bushings. But just be aware that they're not sealed, and you might consider using sealed bearings on all the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting that together. Then I can start on the chassis. That's something a little bit different. So I'm prepping the servos and kind of the side panels, side frames, getting those ready. Just a couple things to mention while I'm doing that. First off, I used a high-tech HS645MG ultra torque servo for the steering. I figure with two steering axles and this big heavy truck that normally the servo is not a great big deal, but in this truck I felt the servo might be a big deal. So heavy duty steering servo, standard shift servo. couple things to make note of though. When you go grab for parts, you really have to look at the manual closely because there's all kinds of little catch-alls. For example, there's two different heights of lock nut. There's the standard lock nut that Tamiya uses, and then there's a thinner one. So you really got to watch the instructions closely. This spacer in the front suspension, normally, and you guys that have ever built a truck say, okay, yeah, there's the suspension spacer, but no, it's this suspension spacer here. So you got to really pay attention. Even things like this spring holder, there's two different sizes now. So double check everything carefully, and even the screws that hold the servos. And there's the normal one, and then there's a silver one, and the silver one even comes in two different lengths. So pay real close attention when you're building these frames. There's lots of little catch-alls like that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish assemble these side frames. There's nothing greatly unusual about them, except of course this little Z for the lift axle. So we'll get to that pretty soon. The frame assembled just fine. No tricks at all. These are actually metal cross shafts here that slide into these retainers, and there's places for screws in the end, but there's no screws in there now. These two pieces here are for the lift mechanism, the cross member, but other than that, everything is pretty normal. The rear bumper is all contained on the XX tree. I assembled the bumper, and this is the pintle hook hitch. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things. This little metal bracket glues into this before you assemble the hook, and they call for synthetic cement. Now, I often get questions about that because they call for that on the bumpers on the bottom of the frame for like grand haulers, and this truck too. So I use this this E6000, which you can get at Hobby Lobby or home improvement stores like Lowe's or Home Depot, whenever they call for this synthetic cement. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this in, assemble this. I'm not going to show it because there's a bunch of fiddly little parts, but and some of them are really little, like this. This is a roll pin, little tiny screws, cross pin, O-ring, that all basically make up this hitch. And most of these parts were contained in a separate parts bag. This one right here that has the stoppers for the springs. Yeah, it took me a while to find them. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get that put together. Then it mounts on the rear bumper, and then this just slides onto the frame and bolts on. So that's the last step before the lift axle. Well, now that I have the hitch done, it's time to install the third axle and the lift mechanism. So these pieces went in when the frame was assembled. I laid out the parts here. So the first thing is to put this bar through, and I just put the shackles on one end, and it slides through this little piece right here and gets the shackles on the other end. So there's a spacer, a couple shackles with a spacer in between, and another shackle, and a thin nut. Again, there's different thicknesses of lock nuts, so you got to really watch the instructions closely. Okay, so that's on. Now the next piece is this little brass lifting collar, which goes with the square and that direction. It's got a cutout right here, and there's a shim that sits on top of it. I'm gonna hold this up mainly so the shim doesn't fall out. Okay, and that sits in there like that. And then this goes across the top. A couple of screws that hold it. Let's see, those are there. Little Loctite. Over the top like that. I know everybody's been really anxious to see how this mechanism works. That's why I wanted to show the whole installation. It's something completely different for Tamiya. Then another one of those screws. This drops over the top here. I'm going to put a screw in it, but I'm not going to put Loctite on it because I might be taking this apart to try and figure out how to make it operate by a servo, which might be a trick because it looks like this takes a lot of, well, it's pretty solid, so it turns. Okay, it takes 270 degrees of rotation to lock that into position. So, that's how it works. Up, and then it pulls it back, which locks it in solid. You rotate it, pushes it forward, which locks it in solid. And it's quite solid. Okay, well that's going to be a little bit of a trick to figure out how to operate with a servo, so we'll think about that as we continue to build the truck. So here's the chassis up to the end of bag A. I didn't even look at operating this with a servo yet because I want to get the steering all hooked up and see kind of how everything looks with the axle on. But it went together really good. A couple of minor points to note. When you're building these steering blocks, the two blocks are actually different. This one only has two screws holding it on and there's molded pins on the back side. So the blocks are not interchangeable. And so just keep an eye out for that. Other than that, the length of the screws is also kind of critical where all this stuff mounts. But again, the instructions are quite clear. The ball bearing kit includes bearings for this block, but it also includes bushings. And the bushings were in the bag with these parts. So just remember to use the ball bearing kit and put ball bearings in those steering blocks. So now we'll move on to bag B. I want to make a little comment about the front suspension on this, and it's the same with all Euro trucks. On the American style trucks the suspension was originally designed for, this little bracket right here is on the opposite side from the steering rod. The steering rod's towards the rear of the truck, and on the Euro trucks it's towards the front. And so one of the problems with the Euro trucks, well, there's two problems. One, the geometry is a little screwed up on the steering. That's not a huge problem. I mean, it is a model. But the main problem is right here, this link hits the shock mount and prevents it from steering all the way by quite a bit. And so I'm going to modify this link, and I'm going to just show you. I'll pop it off here. I've just marked out, it might be hard to see, with a Sharpie, just kind of this area right here, which I am going to grind away with the Dremel tool and modify both sides so that the steering will steer all the way until it hits down here. So I made my little mod. I ground away this area right here, and I just used a bench grinder actually. This tab is just barely supported now, but it doesn't really matter because it's more of a spacer than anything else. And you can see now when I turn it this way, see how close that is, how close it steers. And then I go the other way on this side, you can see we're still a long ways apart. So a lot more steering. This goes all the way and hits the stop here now. So I'll just do this side, and that's just an easy mod that's free to do on any Tamiya Euro truck that has the shock supports on the same side as the tie bar. Well, I've got the steering and the axles all together. Really pretty straightforward. The steering works good. And that works the same whether the axle is in the up position or the down position. The only thing that I've noticed is the spring is very tight to the ball right there, but it works fine. So that concludes bag B. So now it's time to do bag C, which is the rear end, and that's the same as basically every other Tamiya truck ever made. The two rear axles and suspension. So I'm going to go ahead and put that together. You can see I've already put the stops here. I'm going to have to paint these black. Two of the stops came molded in black and two came molded in white. Pretty straightforward. I really want to get the transmission and the driveline and everything in before I think about seeing if I can activate this with a servo, but it actually works pretty darn good just from that knob that turns, and it's very unobtrusive. So if you're going to stay with that, it works fine and looks fine. Okay, we'll do bag C here. So here's the chassis finished. Pretty straightforward. It turned out really well. Yes, I have not attempted to do anything with the lift axle other than the standard setup, at least yet. I did replace the 35 turn motor that comes included in the kit with a 55 turn motor, which gives me a little bit better low speed. I always like to test my system with a single D battery and make sure it runs. If it doesn't run on a single D battery, something's probably wrong. So everything looks good. Now it's time for some decisions because body parts come next, and so I need to decide on a radio and paint. For paint, I actually really like the box color, but I want to do something different than the box color, so I'm going to paint it with Tamiya TS50 Mica Blue, which is their metallic blue, and I think it's a gorgeous color. I haven't done anything that color lately, and I'll probably use gunmetal trim. For the radio, I'm going to use this Fly Sky FS-ST 8 10-channel radio, which I have used in other models. I really like this radio because it's got a lot of really neat controls and knobs, and it's 10 channels. And then for the sound and light system, I struggled with that because on one hand, the Tamiya MFC 03 is available, and the kit instructions show you how to install it. But flipping through the instructions, it's obvious that the MFC 03 is not up to the task of handling the amount of lights that this truck has. For example, if you light up the light bar, you can't light up the spotlights, and there's not enough LEDs for high beams, low beams, turn signals, all the different lighting options on this truck. So I'm going to use the Bayer SFR1, which gives me lighting control and sound and motor speed control all in one unit. So this radio Bluetooths to this, which makes a really nice, easy to install package, and it's also quite small, so it'll fit in the cab, and I can still put my full interior in. I'm going to use a little bit larger Bayer speaker, which I can mount up in the ceiling, and should give me a deep booming sound and enough control to do everything I want. So there's my choices. I'm going to start off by painting, at least starting to paint a myriad of the parts on here, and then I can, while those are drying, I can play with the lift axle and see what I can come up with. So I have the parts clipped out and the flash cleaned off. I'm going to go wash them and then start painting them. Every time I do one of these, I yearn for a king hauler or a globe liner with only a few pieces to paint. There's a lot of parts here. So I'll be painting on this for a couple of days, and once I get the primer and some paint laid on these, I'll come back and start working on the chassis again. So you can see what I've done here is I've removed all the mechanism from the lift axle because there was no way the Tamiya mechanism was going to work with a servo. It's a great mechanism. If you don't want to worry about, powering your lift axle, it works fantastic. I saw no problems with it, but I do want to make my lift axle remote. So I've come up with this little piece of plywood here so I can experiment, and I'm thinking that I can use that, and you can see how it'll pull the axle back with a servo, and I have to do it from above. I can't do it from below. I don't think I can because it doesn't pull the axle back properly. So I'm gonna kind of play with. I've got a micro servo here. I'm gonna play with this and see if I can get the geometry right. And I think I can, and I think it'll work okay. If this pulls it back and pulls it down, then something like that. The only problem is it's probably going to sit a little proud of the surface here, but that I've already thought of, and I can mount this here, and I'll use a diamond plate cover over the top of this and over the top of this, which will kind of cover that area. The other thing you'll notice, there's an air tank in here. The deck for the coupler covers it, so there's no real reason to put it in there, but I'm thinking of maybe mounting a servo in here for a servo operated coupler also. So I'll probably remove that tank and see what I can do there. So anyway, we'll keep playing with it here. I'll show you as we go along. I think this is going to work just fine. I've got my little clip here. I haven't mounted it on permanently, but I just mounted it to a servo horn, and it will fit over the axle, and you can see it pulls it down and pulls it back. The only thing is I don't need it to go forward when it goes up, because the servo will actually hold it up. So occasionally this slides forward and gets hooked. So what I'm going to do to prevent that is I'm going to put a piece of metal on the inside here that just blocks off that little notch, so it goes up and then down and back. And I think that's going to work okay. Actually, it fits in there pretty good and almost completely below the deck height. The servo mounts perfect underneath the rail here, and I'm going to have to make some pretty solid mounting for it, but I'll put a piece of aluminum across underneath or something. I'll show you that too. But yeah, by gosh, I think that works pretty good. It's pretty simple. You can see it's very hidden, and yeah, it's going to work. So to keep the axle from sliding forward into these notches, I took this piece right here, which is a rear bumper cover off a King Hauler and Globeliner, and it's an extra piece in a lot of kits. So you wind up with it, or you could use any kind of plastic. And I just cut it down and made a little piece. It fits perfect inside the frame, like this. Get in there, like that. And now the axle cannot slide forward into the notch. It only can do this. So I'll make one for the other side. There's two strategically placed holes here, so I can put a screw in it to hold it, and that'll give me my axle that goes up and back but does not go forward. And then my little bracket here should work pretty good. Okay, we'll keep working on it. So I've got my little spacers in on both sides. They've filled in that nicely, and so now it goes up and down, but it won't go forward. It still goes backwards, so my little contraption here should work fine. I'm going to go ahead and figure out how to mount the servo, which is going to sit right in here. There's a screw hole down here, and potentially I can put an aluminum plate. I cut the mounting tab here off so it would clear, and so I'll probably put some kind of a plate underneath this, so it wedges in underneath here and then sticks down. But yeah, should work good. So I made a deck out of a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, a couple of screws holding it in, nothing fancy. My servo then just has the little arm with the notch on it, and it just is going to slide over here, and it will go right up tight against the frame, and then so you can see it pulls the axle back, which makes it super solid. The servo does not hold it down, but the servo does hold it up, which is fine, and no big pressure there. So it's going to be important for me to set the endpoints, which I will show later on when I'm setting up the radio, but darn it, that doesn't work pretty good. I had to mount the servo down and paint all this stuff black, but I'm thinking that's just fine. So I've got my servo all mounted in here, and you can see that we're down and locked and up, down and locked and up. It works really good, actually. I'm going to hook up the radio and show you how to set the endpoints for something like this, the proper way to do it, because the endpoint setting is going to be real critical to not overloading the servo and to making this work correctly. So I'm going to paint this, and then I'm going to get my radio set up, and I'll come back. So I want to talk about setting endpoints with a system like this, where we have a limited servo travel and we really don't want to overdrive it. So I've got this, this is the radio I'm going to use in this truck. It's a FlySky FS-ST8 that's been modified with a centering stick for trucks. It's set up for S-Bus because we're going to use a SFR1 in it. And I'm going to use this for my lift axle. So I've got a servo plugged in, and you'll see that it's got a ton of travel. And we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, I'll go to the menu here, and every computer radio has something called endpoints. Now on this one I'm going to run down to channel 6, which is, this is channel 6 on this radio, and you can see the travel. So what I want to do to start with is lower the travel, and I'm going to lower it to 10% on both up and down. Okay, so now we only have that much travel. So that's what we want to do to start with. So now I'm going to unplug this test servo and plug in my servo on the truck that's my lift axle. And it has just a tiny bit of movement. So now what I want to do is I don't know why I'm getting an alarm here. Probably a voltage thing. Anyway, so I'm going to go back to my menu, and I'm going to go back to the endpoints. I'll go back to channel 6. And now, okay, up is, and now what I'm going to do is adjust my endpoints where I want them. And actually 10% up looks about right. And we can go a little bit higher. So we're going to go and I can just watch this move. Till I get it where I want it. Okay. So now I'm going to go down. So I've got 35% up. And now you can see this moving. You can see this move down. And just a little bit more. And there we go. We're 105%. %. Okay, we've got it set the way we want it. So that's how you adjust the endpoints. You start by setting it to a real low value so you don't overdrive it, and then you just slowly increase it until you get it where you want it. So now we have our lift axle hooked to the radio. Works. Everything looks good. I'm putting the coupler together before I do the fenders, but one of the things I found in this kit was it came with this really nice cast metal hook to replace the plastic hook, and I've never seen that before in any kit, so I just thought I'd point that out as I continue to work on this. While I was putting the coupler together, you can see I painted the deck blue. I decided I wanted to put a servo to operate the coupler, and because I can't mount anything up here for space limitations, I just took another deck plate, and you can see I just cut this opening bigger and mounted a servo right to the bottom of it. I just glued it on there, and that will just sit in here like this, and I'll make a short arm to go to the ball on the bottom of the coupler, and I will have a servo operated coupler. So the only thing is now I have to paint this. So I will go ahead and paint this, and I'll get that mounted up, and I can work on the rear fenders. So on my coupler, I've got to make a link for between here and here. So I'm going to just take one of the balls, take one of these long 2mm screws, and screw it in. Take a wire cutter and clip the head off. And whoop. Then screw another ball on it to make myself a nice short link. So we got that way and that way. I should be able to get this thing to snap up here. And snap over my servo. Okay, so now I've got my servo with a link. Let me grab a servo tester. Okay, so that works great. You can see my coupler latch. Now the servo itself doesn't have any pressure on it, just the latch does. So yeah, that works really good. When I get the radio set up, I'll do just like I did with the lift axle and adjust the endpoints. But now I can drop this in place. Just like that. And it's all powered and ready to go. My lift axle is all powered and ready to go. So now I'm prepping the front fenders. You can see I've mounted the light here. They give you a little light bucket. I put a LED in it. And then the fender has actually a hole for the wiring to run through. Nice engineering on this truck. And then this will just bolt on there. And then the fenders will bolt in place. So now we'll have several side lights. So I'll go ahead and mount this light and get the fenders mounted. My goal here is to get this chassis all put together so I can drive it around, see how my lift axle functions when I'm driving it, and get all this stuff tested before I move on to the body. I prepped the tail lights. Since I'm using a Bayer SFR, I installed my own LEDs. So I've got a turn signal, a brake light, a reverse light, and a running light in there. I'll go ahead and mount these, mount the rear fenders, and then I can probably do the front deck plate and put the tires and wheels on it, and then I can drive it around and make sure all my servos are working correctly. Nothing exciting at all about these fenders. They mount just like the other S770 that I did. And yeah, so we'll pull some wiring and get this thing put together. So here's the chassis with all the fenders on. The axle's about half lifted right there. What I'm going to do is I've got a speed control I keep around just for testing. So I'm going to hook up the radio with the lift servo, the coupler servo, the steering, and the throttle, and drive it around a little bit, lift the axle up and down, and make sure my mechanism here is up to the task. I think it's going to be fine. But I want to just check that out before I call this good. So I'll hook these things up. You can see I've got these wires here for the turn signals in the fenders right there. And these wires are for my lights in the back bumper. And there's the coupler and the lift servo wires. Obviously the steering servo and the shift servo. So we'll hook all those up, kind of test everything. I love to test as I go along. Alright, so I love it when a plan comes together. I've got a speed control and stuff hooked up just so I could test things. And so you'll notice that I've got my forward and reverse here. Notice this wheel's not turning because it's not on the ground, it's lifted up. If I flip my lift axle, now it's on the ground. And that works real good, and I can lift it back up. I've got my my coupler, you probably can see that right here. So my remote coupler release is working. I checked the shift. It's working just fine. So I've got the chassis set up the way I want it. I'm going to go out and drive it around a little bit, just try the lift axle in all kinds of different positions, but I don't anticipate any problems. It seems to work just fine right here. And then I'll be back.
Okay, so we're running the truck around, and it's running really good. The axle lifts up and works just fine. Steering works excellent. Axle down. Oh yeah. Winston seems to think it's good. Yep. Okay, buddy. We think it's all right? Axle up. Okay. Yep. All right. We're good.
Well, so there we go. This is going to be the end of part one of this 770S 8x4/4 build. What I really wanted to show was some of the differences between this kit and the other 770. I wanted to figure out how to remote lift the axle, which I have done and works really well. I also showed how to remote the coupler pretty easily. Both of those use a metal geared analog micro servo. I do have some wiring put in for the lights. So in the next video, I'm going to finish building out the truck. I'll do the body. I'm not going to show the painting because I've already painted it with this beautiful Tamiya mica blue. But I'm going to get the cab built. I'm going to do the lighting and then the equipment rack, which will be a big deal. That's something that's completely different on this kit from the other kits. So there you go, 770S. I really appreciate you watching. This is an amazing journey on YouTube. On the 770S video that I did the unboxing, I actually had, for the first time ever, more viewers overseas than in the United States, which is kind of cool. And I expect that'll maybe be the case for this video too. So that was kind of neat. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys watching worldwide. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate the thumbs up. They help with the rankings on YouTube. They help people discover this video. And of course, subscribe to the channel to see the next couple videos on this. Tamiya 770S, great kit, really fun to build. I just really have enjoyed building this. I think when it's done, it's going to be just a fantastic looking and operating truck. So there you go. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.